right, everybody, we are back, and our incredible matchup here between two of the top players in the standings and two of the top players in Nigeria and, by extension, the world. Eta Karo and Wellington Jighere are ready to do battle for us here. And Sam, both of these two players are very fast. I would definitely expect this game to be a barn burner, not just in the plays that are made, but in the speed with which they are made here.
That'll be really interesting to see. I think I mentioned yesterday that I saw in the chat, apparently tournaments in Nigeria use a 20-minute clock. So I'm excited.
Yeah, so looks like an interesting first rack for Eta. Maybe he would be happy to go second and play something like Up Gather. It looks like he's about to show off that he knows that. But I think instead of lament that for too long, he's pretty likely to go ahead and play something, getting those higher point tiles off of his rack to the best of his ability. Maybe just P-U-G-H. Oh, he's thinking about playing pot. Is that a word?
I'm not familiar with that as a word. That was my first thought, P-U-G-H, being it's sort of an interjection, like yucky or whatever. And now he's looking at phage, like it's in bacteriophage.
Yes.
Which is fine, but, kind of uses his best vowels. He's quickly shuffling around, considering several different options, it seems.
Some of which are valid and some of which are not. So pot, P-A-U-G-H-T, and he goes a totally different direction.
Oh.
This is going to be, and that's a great play by him. That's his highest scoring play. It does leave a U, so nicely done there to find the highest scoring play. Pew is definitely a reasonable choice as well, leaving a much better leave. But for an extra 12 points, I mean, this is definitely a reasonable play, Sam.
Agreed. It's a stylistic choice. Looks like Wellington briefly held the play and has now accepted it. So it'll be interesting if he feels confident hooking an S onto it. Probably, I would imagine. Yeah, Pew is more my style, Pew or whatever, to keep things a little more tight and not keep that yucky U around and keep that nice AET, try to bingo. But yeah, this scores really well. It's hard to argue with it. And over to Wellington.
Yeah, Wellington with that CH combination, which you are always happy to see, depending on the state of the board. But not really sure he has a great place to play a CH word. I guess he could play something like watch through the T of hat bag, or whatcha, as in like what you doing. If he holds back one of those two A's, he would be setting one up as a hook. But I think maybe his best idea is to break up the CH combo and play Wida through the H of hat bag. Okay, instead he's gone ahead and played Chaw for 26. That's a pretty reasonable choice as well. Not sure if he thought of Wida here, which seems to score a little bit better and leave a slightly more balanced leave, but I wouldn't say Chaw is kind of a huge mistake here for him.
I like Wida. It is a little unclear to me why, sort of what the rationale is for Chaw as opposed to watch, because watch does seem really nice to set up your own A for the what you doing hook. So that seemed like a good just a good option to me. I guess there's swatch. So there's also a watch, but as a front hook. But so I guess you're giving that S hook in front, but you score 3 more points playing watch as opposed to Chaw, and you have that potential of hooking, and that really kind of would have put Eta in a little more of a bind. As it stands, he's going to try to get rid of at least one of these U's, and he's going to quickly play curved.
Yeah, makes sense. That leaves the E open, and Wellington's going to... Oh, I did it again. It leaves the E open, and that means that Wellington has anodized or adonized through this E if he wants it. There really wasn't that realistic of a play for Eta to block that, except maybe with those same letters, he would consider playing D Burr right here. I'm not really sure why you would do that strategically. It just so happens in this case, it would just barely get in the way of blocking Wellington's bingo that's coming down through that E. So maybe D Burr is better. I guess it scores one more point. Sam, do you see any other reason why playing that would actually be better and not just better in this case?
Well, you could take the extra point. It sets up a bit of an overlapping problem with the AWE on that double word score. But on the other hand, curbed opened up a triple word score opportunity and also some more floating tiles. So I think D Burr is reasonable. I don't see a reason why it's worse than curbed. Anodized, of course, the playing one of those two bingos, the obvious play for Wellington. Nothing really to think about there. I guess except for which one you want to play.
So yeah, anyway, the E stays open and gives Wellington the first bingo of the game and a narrow lead. But Eta does have decent bingo tiles if he can get rid of some of those E's, maybe an R along with it. So the play that looks really nice, I don't know. I mean, of course, I'll just put it on the board and then talk about it. So he can play Edger right here, Eger. So that gets rid of two of the three E's and one of his two R's. It does leave the U, but other than that, this leave is very balanced. The only slight problem with it is that you really would like to leave the hat pegs hook totally unobstructed. It is nice to be able to still play bingos ending in ES or maybe NS or something like that if you happen to draw it. But I don't know. It seems like a risk worth taking to play that word 23 points and leaving a nice balance.
I agree. It looks like a really nice play. He's got a bunch of floating letters. He's got ANOD would still all be open after that play of Eager, and also some letters in curbed, T and hat peg. So that would be a nice way to dump untriplicate himself and also score decently. So he's looking around here, taking his time. Wants to make sure he's not missing a good opportunity to get rid of maybe the E with the U, because that would be really nice if you could somehow get rid of EEU, let's say UGE, EUGE, if that somehow paralleled the letters in anodized. That would be, well, I guess that he wants to get rid of that R as well. He wants to play RUE, as we can see. And he actually is going to, wow, he's just going to play rude. So he might not have seen eager because he's really sacrificing a lot on the scoreboard here to get rid of that U, as opposed to the play you suggested. Well,
yeah, 13 points difference. And that play sort of is like a knife to the heart of the center of the board, too. If Eta does draw a bingo that would only play as an 8-letter word, rude sort of blocks the O, D, and I, all of which are pretty good. But, of course, it does have the benefit, as we were discussing, of leaving the – oh, my God, I did it again. Leaving the S hook of hat pegs totally unobstructed. So that is the benefit. And you can see Eta has Serener or Sneerer, whichever he chooses, ready to go down with hat pegs. So there is a benefit to him making that choice. And maybe he's going to reap the benefits of it on his next turn. It's tough to imagine Wellington finding a way to block off that S hook of hat pegs here.
Yeah, I agree. He had Paolo set up, and now he has Alapa set up. I guess Alapa will play parallel to hat peg. It takes that P in front for Palapa, like that hut.
But that's on the board.
So. Yes, exactly. I just beat me to saying it. So he's not worried about that front P hook, and that's reasonable. He'd be a little more worried about the Z's also gone, so maybe it's not as risky as usual to put an A right below a triple letter score, because his opponent can't play Za, and now he's considering Opal. I guess that might be this will go in the triple word score, so this would actually score pretty well. Of course, the leave is not exactly ideal, but this scores really well, and so this looks like a good option that Wellington has spotted.
Yeah, Opal for 33, Alapa for 24 right here. I guess there is a way if Wellington plays a go that is somewhat obstructive of the hat pegs hook, but it's not going to matter in this particular case. Oh, look at this, a totally different location
Oh
for
my God.
Alapa making the Ruida hook. So this is actually a good way to obstruct the S. So if this is a read by Wellington that, hey, Eta might have an S and be ready to do something with it, this is a great block of words ending in S. The only problem is that Eta has bingos starting with S that are going to go down right now. So nice idea. I'm not sure I would read Eta's previous play of Rude as a setup, but Sam, what do you make of that sequence there?
It's kind of fascinating. It's clearly you're right that I think you're right that he's clearly blocking and he's chosen. We can see that he has consciously chosen to block that S hook or try obstruct the S hook, I should say, right? Because he hasn't fully blocked it. So yeah, now Wellington's holding hat pegs because he held hat peg, and it would make sense at this point to challenge it. By the way, if you are unsure of the word, then for a bingo score and you're only sacrificing 5 points, Wellington's going to give this one a think. But it's interesting. I think it reminds me a little bit of the play we saw made against you, that big block of the Z setup from the Albany tournament by, I think it was Dennis Ikera Gregor, as we see Wellington giving up the 5-point challenge.
Yeah,
it does remind me of that big sacrifice, that sort of comfortability with making a big. In this case, he's not only is he sacrificing several points, but his leave isn't great either. So I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. That was a very long way of saying I don't know. It's a tough decision, and it didn't work out this time, but maybe it does other times. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I really do feel like among Scrabble players, Wellington makes me think right at the top, if not the most, of like, man, obviously we know that Wellington is very, very good at the fundamentals of Scrabble, finding words, finding scoring spots, playing end games, but the way he adjusts to his opponent's moves and the way his style changes from turn to turn, that play of Alapa, if you really think about what does it mean when Eta plays Rude, these other tiles are probably so strong and they probably do contain an S more than you would think. So the play of Alapa looks great to defend against that specific scenario. So I'm liking it more and more as I think about it as he goes ahead and plays Ague here. That might be his highest scoring play, and actually does a decent job of balancing his rack as well. Even though OOLG isn't anything to write home about, at least it's 2 vowels and 2 consonants.
Yeah, good play. I'm skeptical of the Alapa play. I think there are a lot of spots. Well, he did block a lot of lanes, but there's a few different spots to bingo, and I'd be curious to run it through a computer engine and say, if my opponent has EERS, then what are their average scores on the boards after Alapa and after Opal, and what's their bingo percentage. So it'd be interesting to see some of those numbers, but very creative choice, and it's still a close game. And we see Eta has drawn the first blank, also a bunch of consonants, so he's going to dump a few of them. Interestingly, he's decided to play vent instead of just vend. I certainly would have, comparing just those two plays, played vend, and I might have considered playing vends through the E and Serener to grab some extra points. I'm not sure why he's retained the D. I don't know if there's a specific reason for it, specific to this board or this tile bag. I guess there were a few T's to draw, but interesting choice.
Yeah, I don't know. Does anybody in the chat have a thought about that? Because actually I'm looking at the simulation, and vent is is preferred over vend, which definitely is counterintuitive to me. So there has to be some factor that we're not considering here, and I'm very fascinated by what that might be. Another option instead of that would have been even more aggressive would have been to just play dev right here, making agued and also shedding the V, but making a lane that has many, many more hooks, dev hooking with a whole bunch of things. And maybe that is a lane that Eta would be happy to have. In any case, back over to Wellington, and he is looking at a K. That's kind of the focal point of his rack of how can he do something good with that K. Maybe there isn't a great way for him to do that, and he's considering just playing oval, which scores quite well, and maybe you keep the K for next turn. But yeah, this is not the greatest tiles for Wellington. He's going to need help in a hurry because Eta is eventually going to get out of this consonant overload and potentially get a bingo down.
Yeah, no harm in scoring decently. Though those clunky tiles, obviously not what anyone wants to keep on their rack. So it's just a matter of other options. Not seeing anything in the chat here. Nothing comes to mind immediately. But I guess there's, Boak, Boak, which it's not great. And the leave isn't really much better. So I guess I'd prefer oval probably. Well, it's actually 26, so it's not bad. But and now it looks like Wellington has set up GOA. I'm not sure where on the board he's thinking.
I think it's less that he set up GOA.
Keytall.
And yeah, the other letters he's considering playing Keytall through this E, I think. Sorry for my chicken scratch. That's probably another option for him. So he really has identified pretty much all of his options here, and choosing between these, he's only down narrowly. I'm not sure what he can infer about Eta's previous play event other than he has a lot of consonants, right? So maybe the idea of playing through this E is attractive for that reason, because this is really the only freely open vowel on the board. So if he's playing through here, I guess Keytall will open an O, but the E is always a little bit better of a tile. Not only can you score stuff through that E, you can also bingo through it much more easily than through an O. So that could be some of the reasoning behind Keytall. So this is a really tough position. There's a whole bunch of options that are really, really close. I'll be curious to see which he chooses, and he is going to go ahead and play oval. When in doubt, always a good idea to take the extra points on offer, and oval accomplishes that, Sam.
I agree. This is kind of the type of play I would like if I saw it. I would take it for that very reason. Eta's quickly lined up Dewey, which seems like a very solid play, hooking Agued, using that double word score, scoring well. He's got to offload those consonants. He kept them. Well, he had all consonants last turn, and he still did this turn with the semi-exception of the Y. Meanwhile, Wellington has drawn a pair of I's. So he's again going to try to work out of this. Maybe now he goes for Keytall, unless there's a better option that's appeared with those eyes on his rack. I guess Keytall, of course, the problem is you're keeping those duplicate eyes, and you'd love to find a play that gets rid of them.
Yeah, it's tough. And meanwhile, Eta is just not drawing well enough to get that bingo down. So this is it's a huge break, because Eta sitting on that blank, you would think he has a decent chance to get one of those bingos down. But actually, what's happening here is the board is kind of getting more and more closed. So depending on what Wellington goes for here, yeah, Keytall, now that blocks the E and R of Serener. So at this point, the board has gotten so closed that the only way to play a bingo is by having an S and playing Keytalls, or I guess you can play into the Y of Dewey. But look at how difficult of a board this is to work with as far as bingos, Sam. It's a tough one for sure.
It's really, I think it's working out. And what's going on there with the tiles? I guess Wellington's kind of kind of looks at them over the board almost as he's drawing them. You can see him in his hands over the board there on the video camera. So yeah, I think this has kind of worked out to Wellington's favor somewhat, though Eta has finally drawn some vowels, and now he's he could play something like vittles and ketolls, or probably something better than that. I don't know if stative. I guess you can. I guess it doesn't quite fit with Alf's there. I think it made sense that Wellington's playing somewhat defensively because it was a closed game and his letters weren't particularly flexible. He wasn't really close to a bingo. So he's saying, I'm going to take away the bingo opportunities for the most part because I'm not well positioned to get the next bingo, to get that sort of critical third bingo that is going to put someone up by a bingo lead. But he's just been a little bit out-tiled here because he's still got a bit of a clunky rack with a bunch of extra vowels, double I's, double E's, and Eta's finally, close to a bingo. So it's hard to imagine him making a play that's going to block that ketolls hook.
Yeah, I agree. The two plays in that spot, unfortunately for Eta, he has that ST combination. So you would think maybe there'd be a way to get to the double word score. But in fact, the only options are trivets and vittles in that spot. So, but as you suggest, Sam, there's pretty much no way. This is a really cool spot for the G, but I don't think there's really a play worth making in this spot here. I mean, something like Geo here would score decently well. Maybe he'll do that. That would be kind of crazy. The play that I kind of like, and I think Wellington is considering it, is, I wrote the G in the wrong spot, but goopier through the OP at the top of a board looks like a great way to dump a whole bunch of his letters. And again, from Wellington's perspective, both blanks are out there. So starting to turn through tiles makes some sense. Instead, he's going to play goier, which is the same tiles for 7 fewer points. So maybe there's a strategic consideration there, or maybe he just didn't think to play the same tiles through OP. I would never be confident to assume that Wellington missed anything, but I think I would prefer the extra points for goopier there.
Yeah, I agree. I'd be surprised if he saw goopier and he kind of forewent it for some unclear kind of strategic or tactical value, but yeah, it's possible, I guess. Maybe he's on hold here because it doesn't look like he's drawn his tiles. Goier, a bit of a it's a Collins only word. The goey, which we see on that scrolling bar there underneath the board. So I'm not sure if he's on hold or not, but Eta will, almost surely Eta will play probably trivets, or if not that, vittles, and will take a pretty good lead. And this will be an important pick for Wellington because the board's kind of got not that many places to play. I guess you could kind of parallel next to the if you really had the right tiles to hook it, like that last A. But he's probably going to have one shot at hitting. I'd almost consider vittles because it does have defensive merit.
I was waiting to get to that point of, do you put the V here just because even though that scores 6 fewer points, and I feel like Eta's arranged his tiles in that way, but if you were to play trivets in this spot as well, there's definitely more of a threat of, playing something heavy in response as a bingo. So he is going to take the more defensive approach, and Wellington is going to meet this pretty much immediately with join, I would expect, which is going to keep this game relatively close going into the latter stages.
This is the sort of the flip side of vittles, right? You sacrifice 6 points for defense, which, it occurred to me, of course, I suggested it, but the triple word score, there's a possibility, there's a Q out, you can make a QU play or something, and then the J out, as we see, this J is going to hit hard for nearly a bingo score. So even vittles had its issues, I guess you could say, with this possibility. So I still think it was a pretty good play. I think defensible or maybe even optimal, but maybe he'll miss the 6 points. I don't know. I'm finding it a little tough to evaluate between those two. Wellington played 5 tiles, so there's no reason to think Wellington's going to hit you with a bingo immediately.
Yeah, it's all good points. I think it's a very tough call between those two plays. Yeah, I mean, the nice thing about playing Trivets in this spot, you get the 6 extra points, and then basically, if Wellington doesn't have a bingo immediately, if you're Eta, you can just address the spot and make a really blocky play on your next turn. And Wellington has a pretty strong incentive to play to that triple no matter what, whether he has a bingo or not. So I don't know. It's tricky. Eta drawing the Q, which is, I feel like there should be some places to play this, but I'm not sure where those might be. It seems like drawing QU is always a boon compared to drawing the Q without a U. But is there even, what can you even do apart from playing like Quim right here, which leaves other awful tiles on Eta's rack?
Yeah, I was looking for somewhere to play that word, and if I didn't consider finding the U on the board to play through.
Yeah, exactly.
He set it up as well because it's the only word with a Q on his rack other than QI. So that might be what he has to do. Of course, when you have the Q with the U together, you can always consider just retaining them and hoping to have a better option going forward. I mean, you could imagine, for instance, if he could find a good play that doesn't hook Rueda, that could be a really lucrative spot for him. He's not too far off from a play like, say, Kino, right? Quino making or, and that would score over 50 points for him. It does look like he's set up this Quim, but that's just something I would consider. Like, is there a good, maybe he could play just Nog? It looked like you were about to tell us in that area.
The issue with this is the play that you suggested, Sam, of Kino right here. You would be using your O for that if you play Nog. That being said, this does look like a really nice spot to gun for with that Q if you have it. So it's tempting for sure. Instead, Eta is going to take no chances with that Q and just dump it now while he has a decent scoring play. It's worth noting Quim right here scores 28, exactly the same number that Nog would score. And then you get the peace of mind of not having to worry about that Q, or, maybe you just don't draw a good 5-letter play here and you continue to slog, holding it on subsequent turns. So it makes some sense. I kind of feel like I like Nog and Ego, but not so much that I'm going to worry about it too much.
Yeah, of course. Like, I think it's important to clarify that we're talking about relatively minor considerations, not major blunders. There hasn't been anything like that. Those, quite frankly, if you can go through the tournament and not make what in chess they would call the 2 question mark plays, if you don't make many of those, you're going to do really well. If you're not making the bingo misses, missing big scoring spots, these are important. They're part of the game. Players like Wellington, for instance, or Nigel Richards, and you make them so much. And speaking of Wellington, he has that good rack, and he's going to actually shed a lot of the letters of it. He's going to try to score decently with Narek. He is going to use that alpha hook. He had the last A, so he could have thought about keeping it if there was anything worth considering to keep it with. I guess you could have played something like Ariak and or Ariak, or however that word is said. But this is going to score pretty well.
Yeah, it's interesting because you noted this before, Sam, about the A hook on alpha, and that was actually the last A in the bag. So I'm just curious, given that spot is quite difficult to use, I'm just wondering if Wellington maybe has some other play that keeps the A on his rack, because this is kind of a sneaky, and now he's picking it up. I wonder, but now the element of surprise is gone. If he picks it up and plays something else, Eta has now seen that A here, and he's going to know that a play obstructing this hook is maybe more preferential than it would have been otherwise. Maybe there is no way to make a play that scores anything or does anything good for the board and also retains an A, but that's certainly what I would be looking for here.
Yeah, something that, you could consider icier, for instance. It's not, a marvelous play by any means, just 20 points, but does keep that A for the future. And but now at this point, let's say Eta had the S, to your point, Eta might say maybe a borderline play hooking Alfs is worth it at this point. If he had a play like that was, under consideration, or a play going through the op that would obstruct that hook. So, it looks like Wellington's got crime set up. So that's a good play too, actually. I think that's along the same lines of what we're talking about. It's 23, takes out a nice scoring area that for Eta, though, it does give back parallel plays, and Eta can certainly still use that area.
I've seen my favorite play suggested by Adam in the chat, and that is Irenic right here. That's the play I like the best from Wellington's POV. Irenic right here has the benefit of scoring well. It keeps that A, and if Wellington's able to draw the second blank after a play like that, now you've got this sneaky lane where maybe you can find a 7-letter word with an A in that position. And furthermore, Irenic almost necessitates that Eta try to play through this I to the triple, or maybe parallel to Irenic, to eliminate easy scoring plays from Wellington's next turn. So I love Irenic as the play here. Very, very tricky spot to think about all those details. Not sure that I would see it over the actual board here, but that feels to me like the most natural play.
That does seem like a good play. I do wonder about some of the parallel opportunities you're giving back. There are a few, there's really nowhere to bingo unless you have that A, which Wellington does. So he's not worried really about a bingo, even with that blank out. But there's a bunch of sort of heavy point tiles, a B, an F, an M, a Y, and they can go on top of Irenic. And in fact, Eta would have something like Bufo, B-U-F-O, which would score like 36 or so, which, isn't huge, but it's more than Irenic. So he's considering Aric now at the bottom. It is a tough turn. He's let his time, and now he's just going with Neric. I think given that he put Neric on the board, I don't mind this play at all because he's already kind of revealed his hand, as you said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So Neric, the play, he's committed it. So we move on. And really a hallmark of Wellington's style is, and we've seen this a number of times, maybe it's something that's common to a lot of elite players, is just patience and the willingness to wait for just the right opportunity. And I do feel like even though Wellington is down by 14 points, even though the board is really, really closed, this is a difficult board to work with. Certainly playing bingos is going to be next to impossible now after Neric. Wellington might feel like, hey, maybe I can draw the X and an S and the blank and find my way to a win here with those tiles. And he might be right.
It's going to be a great fight to the finish. And speaking of bingos, Wellington's got 2 valid ones, 7-letter words on his rack. As we said, of course, they're not going anywhere on this board. You can't, there's no letter that goes after Serener. There's really barely any space for a bingo. Eta does have a nice possibility of Fogu, however that word is said, F-O-G-O-U, making U-R-E, some nice Collins only international words, not valid in the North American lexicon. That would be a nice way to sort of clean up the clunk. It does, open up some possibilities for Wellington that F could, I don't know. It might be worth it. There's no letters that can go atop of the G to make a 2-letter word anymore. So Wellington, as good as this rack looks, this might not be the rack that you want at this point in the game, because where's he going to score points with this?
So instead of the play you mentioned of Fogu, Eta is considering playing boy, and I think his thinking behind this play is that this spot for the X is one of the few good scoring spots left on this board. I think he's decided I'm going to go ahead and obstruct it and block it right now as he switches his play to buy instead of boy. Makes sense. He's probably rationalizing this and thinking, if I'm blocking the X, I'm going up by almost 40 points on an absolutely deadlocked board. There's to your point, as you just said, Sam, Wellington has 2 7-letter bingos on his rack. Neither are even close to playing on this extremely closed board. That lead of 40 points is pretty ironclad here. And now we see Eta drawing the second blank, which is going to be very, very difficult for Wellington to overcome.
Great points, Will. I think it's a great play. I think he's showing his defensive skill there, identifying sort of the biggest threat, not being a bingo, but it being that X and that double letter opportunity there. Sort of the cherry on top, Adam in the chat mentions that ego spot, YGO, has never been used. And oh my God. Wellington is just staring at the Sereners.
Look at that face. Look at that furrowed brow. Look at that. He's thinking to himself, are you kidding me?
When my opponent makes a phony, I usually... I don't stare at the word because it's too obvious. I just go straight to I do try to look at my score sheet, because you don't want to give anything away. You want to keep your poker face. I was on stream recently and my opponent played a phony and I did the same thing. I just writing down 0 basically, putting an S on an adjective, same way. So Wellington's giving away his S, but there's only 5 letters left in the bag anyway. So wow, I lost my train of thought. But Eta also kept that NOG space where he can score pretty well, which actually might be a pretty good score on this board of 28. All things considered. He's played this pretty well. Even the Vittles thing, that choice of Vittles has even worked out for him, really. And Wellington, gosh, it's kind of hard to imagine how he's going to win without that Sereners.
Yeah, that's funny. I mean, I'm just wondering what good it does Wellington to show that as. I just feel like there's no world where I guess Wellington could try it, just rationalizing I have no other way. But I think Wellington knows full well that Serener is an adjective and not a noun. So I'm just, could he be trying to motivate Eta to play differently by exposing the S? I'm not really sure. Maybe there's some thought to the gamesmanship of it that I'm not appreciating. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. This board is just so tightly compacted. I don't really even know what you're. Oh, look at that. Resty. Is that a valid word? I don't think that's a word.
You could play reset in the same spot with the same letters.
I predict. Oh, okay. He's going to go ahead, and I wonder what Eta is going to do about this. This is hilarious because this isn't a word, but it creates a gargantuan X play right here.
Oh, maybe.
So there's a really easy solution to this from Eta's point of view. Just challenge it off and not worry about it at all. But if Eta gives Wellington too much credit here and doesn't challenge this word, now he has to think about how to block this X spot because we know Wellington is very likely to draw it here. So that is crazy. I don't even know. This is not what I would have thought of, Sam.
This is fascinating. This looks like, it's very possible that this is an intentional phony to complicate the game and set up the X because he knows Eta just blocks the X and Eta does make the correct challenge. Well done. If you don't know a word for 5 points, it did really complicate things for Eta because with just, those 5 extra points could have made a difference. He might think to himself, gosh, I'm just going to score a little bit blocking and, is there some way that Wellington could overtake me if I give him these extra 5 points? And this is a word, but correct challenge, well done. That was really fascinating. There is Rosti, Rosti, so it's a similar word. But yeah, wow. I don't know. It'd be very interesting to see if they discuss this, because you wonder what is Wellington up to? Is he? Because I think he very well might have. It was a very good gambit, I think.
Yeah, the whole sequence of that was quite fascinating. A lot to think about, playing the S there, the phony word. And, if you're Eta, maybe it's like, oh, okay, obviously he's not going to play that phony. So whatever he plays is going to be good. But also keep in mind, too, that if you're going to play a phony 5-letter word, that's not the worst one to try, just because 5-letter words containing really great bingo tiles are actually words that you might not actually see that often in Scrabble, because if you have those really nice tiles, you're probably playing only a small number of them or playing a bingo. So playing a 5 or 6-letter word with those nice bingo tiles, maybe you can catch Eta sleeping on that and draw that X and create a serious threat. So that is incredibly creative. And frankly, this game is in such huge trouble for Wellington that plan might be as good as any other that I could spot there.
I agree. I was just staring at his rack, like what he's only down by 38 with such a marvelous rack, but what's he going to do? How could he even conceive of some way to win this game, basically? But this is seeming to, that was a great attempt for exactly the reason you said. That's a tough word to be confident about, unless you're really solid on all of your 5-letter words. Those are some of the, like resit, which I mentioned. That's one of the least useful 5-letter words. It's very rare that it pops up in a game. It's down there with like buzzy, maybe not quite buzzy, but a word that doesn't appear very often given the letters. So Eta's going to score, and this one's now pretty safely, in his hands after the phony.
Yeah, and I have to say also, very impressive job by Eta to repeatedly be finding ways to score well while also keeping the G on his rack and knowing that if he needs it, there is another, solid play, almost 30 points waiting for him in that spot. So on this really close board, taking the more specific spots while they're available and saving the spot that he knows only he can use with this final G. Whereas, this spot could have been usable for an X. This spot probably could have been usable for simple underlapping plays for Wellington. So nicely played by Eta as well to continue to hold on to that G.
Yeah, he's shown his stuff on his first stream game of the 2024 World Cup. And it's pretty much just playing out the string for Wellington. He's just going to play Twal and kind of get this game over with, I think.
Yeah, the only question is, does he play the S as well? Looks like he will, just to try to give himself a better chance to play out on his next turn. This is basically Wellington saying, good game. I'm going to throw in the towel here and move on. So it bears noting too, Sam, that we've seen Wellington twice on the stream. He's about to lose this game, and he lost the other game that he was on the stream. So he's literally won all 8 of his other games that were not on the live stream. Hopefully he doesn't hate us too much.
Yeah, maybe we're bad luck so far, but and he didn't do so hot in the Ultimate Scrabble Showdown in Albany. But then when it came to the 28 or 31 game main event, he did very well and won easily. So Eta did see that spot. I was wondering if maybe he had overlooked it. But he does see the spot, and he uses his G very nicely for that great score with that that archaic past tense or archaic word. I don't even know what was ego. I think maybe it's a past tense of go, I guess.
Right.
Archaic past tense. No, though now he's reconsidering. Maybe he's just considering dropping his O instead of his E and seeing which will score more next turn. Yeah, it's a great game. And Eda's going to tie him at the top of the standings, well, in terms of win-loss with 8-2. And in fact, Eta will surge into first place.
Yeah, Wellington's certainly still in great shape going forward. 8-2 in your first 10 games in a field of this caliber is nothing to sneeze at. For those people in the chat saying, that I also played a match with Wellington on stream, anybody that saw that match understands that the tiles were quite lopsided there. And if we were to do that match again, my odds of, unless I played significantly better, my odds of winning that match would be exceedingly low. Wellington definitely playing at a phenomenal level. So yeah, in any case, Eda's thinking it over. I think really he has the choice of either neg or nog. And that actually, I think this is slightly better. Playing the O instead of the E, it must give him a couple of extra. I wonder what the follow-up plays are, but either way, Eda's about to put the finishing touches on this game. Wellington without a great place to play is X, and these two players are still going to be right atop the standings.
Yeah, it's been a really fun game. I think we've seen a couple of good games. Looks like Eta could do something like re-stem, or he could do steam, STEEM. So now he is changing it. And I guess he's playing some. Is there a word? Is there a letter that goes at the end of some that he can? Well, Eda's trying to maximize his score. Good for him. That's how you ought to do it.
Yeah, he's thinking about every possible option. So I think from his perspective, if he plays nog, the follow-up play that he would have is very impressive. He would play, re-stem in this spot right here would be his follow-up. So that's what happens after nog. So re-stem making high and hams. That being said, if he plays neg, it's almost exactly the same. Just going through it here, it looks like a much more complicated sequence. So neg ends up working out similarly, but the sequence is going to take a bunch more moves in it. And Wellington just plops that X down right away as if he was totally prepared for the resulting play. And that's a pretty good response by him. And I guess now if Eta wants to go out, he can pluralize vents with something like Mosey. So there you go.
Yeah, I feel like it's a very human move. At least at this point, I think, I can go out. Like, let's do it. I don't want to have to think about where can you put your IIN, how many points can you score with your IIN. But it is a good point that, a minor point, but a good point that you can often maximize your score by taking an extra turn here, because he can use all those good tiles he has to score more in 2 turns, even though he's letting Wellington, get an extra play in.
Yeah, for sure. So, he is. Look at this. He is. Oboism.
It was just a lot of phonies. They're playing phonies instead of regular Scrabble.
Yeah, he's not gonna play oboism. Wellington looks almost like he's asleep, I might add, if you look at his posture. Yeah, so he is in shutdown mode. So yeah, there we go. Mosey does end up coming down here. Let me make sure the score is updated after all these plays. Sorry, everybody. It should be updated in just a moment, I think. There we go. All right. So after that, after all those plays, Eta is going to come out on top by a pretty solid margin. Wellington was as close as like 10 points behind. But I think it was the calculated risk of Resty that set him back a little bit. But I think that was like crazy like a fox, Sam.
That's my guess as well. It's hard to say. You can mix those words up. There's so many anagrams in there. So it's possible he just thought it was a valid word. But I don't know.
Yeah, maybe the players are going to discuss. Something tells me that they might just go straight to the post game, but maybe let's see if they have anything to share about this game. I'm guessing possibly not. So far, so quiet. All right. Well,
Yeah, I think Wellington's ready for a lunch break.
seems like all business here. So yeah, maybe if we actually see them start talking, we can come back down to the board. But I would not be surprised if they just move on to the next round. It is all business, and it's not surprising given that these two players are right at the top of the standings. That they're taking that approach here. So in any case, that does it for our morning session. So what's coming up in the afternoon? We're going to do one more game from the Collins division before we go back into the North American focused WoW division. Very, very close to the normal North American lists. So for those that are hoping for more play from there, we will have 3 more games in that division this afternoon. But we've got a lunch break to get to first. And yeah, Sam, it's been a pleasure to commentate alongside you a second time. The games have been absolutely phenomenal. Are you having any FOMO to be at the World Cup there in Albuquerque?
I had a lot of FOMO last week, watching the games. Not that I'm not having FOMO this week too, but commentating is a more active role. But it's such a pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Will, and the stream team. Thanks for having me onto your channel. And I definitely want to get back at it. I'm going to be playing some local tournaments here in like Virginia and in the area. And I hope to make maybe the World Cup next year or the SPC. And I do hope to make the World Championship next year, where I have not been in over a decade after going twice. So yeah, I just love seeing all this Scrabble action, and I have to admit, there were some great games this morning. I thought we saw some really great games. A lot of fun.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I also feel like I'm very amped to try to be my very best Scrabble self in time for the World Championship next year in Ghana. Of course, the selection of the site in Ghana is a great one just because it's going to allow players like these two and many, many other amazing players from the African continent to compete at the World Championship without some of the usual issues that they face with respect to travel visas, etc. So I, for one, am extremely excited to test myself against players like this, who, whenever you see Wellington or Eta come stateside, they give us all we can handle. These guys have won a lot of our biggest events on a regular basis. So it's going to be a blast. But we still have so much left to be decided at this event, the 2024 World Cup. Eta and Wellington towards the top of the standings with 8-2 records right now. But we're going to take a lunch break and be back in about an hour and a half. I'm going to continue to chug my hot water and honey and keep my voice nice and fresh, trying to deal with a little bit of a COVID case as best as I can. But yeah, I think, like I said, we're going to cut to our break right now. See you in a little more than an hour with more play from the 2024 World Cup in Albuquerque, New Mexico.